All right. I first of all just want to say, to the organizers, just thank you for inviting me here. I'm really loving Singapore so far. To be honest with you, I've got to say this is easily the hottest country I've ever visited in my entire life. Like, I don't know why I brought this jumper. Sometimes branding isn't important, but basically in this talk today, I'm just going to talk about the StoreKit2 API and how you can use it in your apps to make money. So if anyone in the audience gets rich off this talk, don't forget who give you this information. So a bit about me. So, just do this. So a bit about me. So basically, like Tim said, my name is Tunde Adegoroye. I'm actually based in Manchester, UK. I'm a lead app developer for Bally's Interactive. Now you're probably all wondering what's going on in this video. Don't worry, I'm gonna get to it. But basically, in my spare time as well, I also, like Tim said, create content on YouTube. So I teach iOS development, Swift. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a Swift UI guy, but I do UI kit here and there. I also you can see I was the exact same Tim, right? So I also as well watching anime. So I'm currently watching Boku no Hero Academia. So if there's any anime heads in the house here, come and talk to me after, man. I can talk about it all day. And on to this video. So the company I work for, I'm employed by, they basically had a sports day where we were competing in different competitions. One of them was the wheelbarrow race. So you can see that, we're struggling at the start and, we'll get in there. But once it switches to me, you'll see that I just turn on the horsepower and then basically just blitz through. So if iOS development doesn't work for me, I know what my second calling in life is. So if anyone needs a wheelbarrow partner, sign me up. So you're probably wondering, okay, what am I going to get out of this talk? So we're going to talk today about the new APIs available to us in StoreKit 2 from iOS 16. Also, we're going to talk about in-app purchases. We're also going to talk a bit about debugging. And we're also going to talk about App Store Connect as well. So you want to make money in your apps, and how is this possible? Well, you're actually able to make money via in-app purchases. And we, as developers, whether you're a solo dev or if you're someone who works for a company, we put a lot of effort into the applications that we build. It's only fair, if you want to make a living out of it or generate some kind of income. And that's how we can do that, using StoreKit. And let's be honest, who doesn't like making a little bit of money, right? So when you're working with in-app purchases, there's 4 different kinds. Now, the first kind is a consumable. So the best way to think about a consumable is it's kind of like a fire and forget. So you can once you eat it, like a hamburger, it's gone. Once you purchase it, that's it, it's gone. Now, you also have non-consumable as well. And essentially what these are is you basically buy this item and I now own that item. Kind of like if you buy an iPhone or if you purchase an app with some kind of service that you can unlock, that's something that you can own. You can either get a refund or you can restore it as well. We have auto renew subscription as well, which basically allows us to get an service for a period of time. So that could be 3 months, 6 months, or a year. And then every single year or that period of time will automatically renew. And we have non-renew as well, which essentially means that similar to a auto-renew, once that period of time is now finished, you have to actually manually say, okay, I want to buy this for another year, kind of a bit like a pass. But in this talk, we're mainly going to be talking about consumables. So with consumables, you're actually able to set them up using StoreKit. But if you've never even heard of what that is, you might be wondering, what is that? Well, the StoreKit API basically allows us to access some of Apple's features via an App Store Connect. So that could basically be making a purchase, which is what we're going to be talking about today, or it can allow you to basically access things reviews. So someone can request a review in your app. Now, Apple recently just made some updates as well to the StoreKit API, and one of them was making things easier for us, which is what I'm going to show you in this talk. But also as well, they made some language updates, so we can use Swift concurrency within our applications as well. Now, I'm not going to go into too much about Swift concurrency in this talk, and you might have gone to Daniel's workshop this morning, but if you are interested and you want to learn more about Swift concurrency, I actually do have a free course on my website, which is on my YouTube channel, that you can actually check out if it's something that interests you as well. So you might be wondering, okay, so if that's the case, then Tunde, why is there so many services out there that allow me to do in-app purchases? Well, to be honest with you, there's actually nothing wrong with you using a third party. The only thing I just want to show you in this talk is how you can actually get maybe some kind of functionality that you would get from a third party, but you just spend a bit of time looking at the StoreKit2 API. So in this talk, I'm mainly going to be focusing on the consumables, like I said before, but we're going to be looking at how we can build something like this, which is just a tip jar where someone can leave tips within your application. So you can see that I can leave a tip, and then I get a thank you screen. So when you're working with something like this, you normally need to actually see the products that you're actually working with and working on. So how can you see this? Well, what you can do is, starting from Xcode 13, you can actually set up something called a StoreKit configuration file. And what this allows us to do is basically set up local products within Xcode where we can easily just test it out. So we don't need to start going through test flight and creating a sandbox account and all that other annoying stuff we had to do before. We can just basically test out locally and then go from there. So just show an example of this. What I have here is a demo of that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new file new, and then when I go to here, I'm basically going to search for StoreKit configuration. So you should see that you'll get a StoreKit configuration file. So after doing that, you can actually give your StoreKit configuration file a name, but you also have a setting here where you can actually sync your products directly from App Store Connect as well if you wanted to. So if I have products set up in App Store Connect, I can actually get them to be basically downloaded and available to me to test locally within this file. Now, once I hit next, that's pretty much it. Now, you might be thinking, all right, I'm done here. I can now start deving. But there's actually a very important step as well that you need to follow after you do that. And that is actually saying that you want to set the StoreKit configuration file on your target. Now, in order to do that, what you'd have to do is select your target and then go to the run options, run the debug options on the run, and then go to options and then choose the file. So what's going to happen now is that when I'm actually running my application in debug mode, essentially I'm going to get that local configuration file as my setup when I'm actually testing this out. So you've done all that, and now you've got your StoreKit file. So what I'm actually able to do now is I can basically just set up a product. So in order to do that, I just got to hit the little plus button here, and then once I hit that plus button, I can choose what type of product that I want. So pretty simple. So I've done all that now, and I now have this set up here. So this is where I can basically fill out the information for my product so I can actually test this out. Now, the first thing you can do is actually set some kind of name on the item. Now, when you're setting a name on the item, you want to make sure that this is unique, and also as well, you want to make sure that it's clear what the actual product is. You can also set an identifier, and the best way to think about this identifier is it's kind of like a bundle identifier. So this is like your bundle ID for your product. So you want to make sure that this doesn't exist already in any existing applications that you own, and also as well, you want to make sure that this is unique per product so they're not all the same. We can set a price too, so you want to make sure as well that the price is just the monetary value that you're going to be simulating. Now, this price that I'm setting, it's not actually something where, it's actually going to go to App Store Connect, because if you've ever done this before in App Store Connect, you usually have to select a, price from a list of items. This is just you just faking the amount that comes through. And then I can actually set the description and the title that I show to a user, along with some localizations as well. So if you need to manage different languages, you can do all of that in here. So now we have the product set up. What we want to do now is actually find a way to actually get those products and use them in our code. So I've just simply got an array here of the product identifiers, and this is just the unique identifier of each product that I have set up. Now, for me, I just put this in an array. If you want to put this in a database or a plist, completely up to you. You don't have to put it inside of an array, but just for example, it is. So this is all the identifiers I'm going to use to fetch a product. So if I want to fetch a product, I've just got a store here, and this store is just something that I'm going to be using essentially to basically just pass between different views and whatnot. And within here, I have a asynchronous function called retrieve products, which lets me fetch products. Now, if I want to fetch those products like I set up before, now with the StoreKit2 API, all I need to do is just literally call the products for function on the products API. So this is like really nice, really simple. It's just like a one-liner. And with async await, all I need to do is use the await keyword. And also as well, I can just use the try keyword to basically catch any errors. So simply just by doing this, passing an array of my identifiers, I'm pretty much good to go to get all of my products. Now you might think, we're done here, but a little habit that I just like to, do for myself, my own sanity. So, if I push something to production, I'm like, why isn't this working? I like to just basically sort products based on their price as well to ensure that they're always definitely going to be in the correct order. So it's just something that I like to do. Now that we've got this function, if I actually want to use this, all I need to do is that in the initializer, create a task, and then I can call the await keyword and say I want you to retrieve those products. So essentially what's going to happen is when I create an instance of this class, is it me or did it just get darker in here? Anyway, so I was thinking, am I losing my mind? Anyway, so something that you can realize is that basically is that like in the initializer, I can now fetch those products when my object is now initialized so that those items are ready when someone wants to go through my application. So I don't have to like call load. So in my opinion, you don't want to call retrieve products like before someone gets to your tip screen or whatever it may be, like have it ready when your app launches. Now, in order to use that, all I need to do is at the root of my application, should have put a disclaimer, this is all going to be Swift UI, by the way, but at the root of my application, I just basically need to create an instance of that using a state object, and I can now pass it through all of my child views, basically using the environment object. So if we go into our environment object, I've now got access to my store here. I can now loop through the items and display them on the screen. And then if we go even deeper into my child view, I can now access each property on my product. So like we set up before, I can get the name. I can also get the description. And I can also get the display price. And the nice thing about this display price property is it actually handles the currency for us. So we don't need to worry about like converting this between different currencies. This would like format for us depending on the locale of your device, which is pretty nice. But if you're someone who wants to actually get the monetary value, what you can actually do is use the price property, which allows us to basically access, the value from here. So I can get the decimal value and access it from there. Now, you might be wondering, okay, that's all good, but, how can I actually make a purchase? How can I make a bit of money now? Do you know what I mean? Well, what we can do now is we can actually call the purchase function on within our store and make a purchase. But first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to create a function called purchase, and then we're going to pass through the item that we want to purchase. And then in order to purchase it, all I need to do is just call this function on the item, purchase, and it's using async await again. Now, you might be thinking, all right, cool, I'm good to, commit this, push it to live. We're not done just yet. There's actually a few more steps that you need to be aware of when you're actually making a purchase as well. And the reason why is because if you look at the result, property there, it's actually, holding some kind of like value, but what is inside of result at this moment in time? Well, what's inside of result is all the different states that could actually possibly happen. So when someone's making a purchase, it could be successful, it could be interrupted, it could be cancelled, or it could have some kind of unknown error. And you can see with the print messages here, like the different things that could happen. But the main thing I want to focus on is this property here called verification. So when you're working with StoreKit2, each transaction is actually verified. So essentially what that means is that each transaction basically has a JWS payload token with a signed transaction. Now, this is basically used to verify you are who you say you are when you made this purchase. So in a nutshell, the StoreKit2 API basically handles validation for us. So we don't actually need to do transaction validation. It's already validating us and telling us, okay, this is who this person is who made that transaction. And what that means is that once a user's been validated, we can essentially just like serve up the content to them to say, okay, you are who you say you are. Here's the content that we're going to give you. So in our example, what does that look like? Well, we have this screen here where I basically say, thank you. And what we're going to do is we're going to say thank you after the user has been, validated and verified. So us serving up the content in this scenario is me showing this screen. So me showing, this view. Me showing this view is me saying, okay, this person's been validated, everything's all good. We can let them, carry on. Now in your apps, that might be something like maybe having a badge to show that someone has like maybe given you a tip or maybe someone's purchased something. But essentially you want to make sure that you do this, verification. Now in code, what does that look like? Well, in code, we can actually get the value from that, the item that we had before, and we can actually pass it through this function. So essentially, we have two cases here. So we have verified and we have unverified. So the whole point of this function is basically if someone is unverified, we're going to throw some kind of error to say, okay, you're not verified. And if everything's okay, we're just going to return the value that we get back from this associated item to say everything's all right. Now, in terms of actually using this in our code, all we need to do is where we have our success, we now just basically check to see if we are verified. And if the error is basically like thrown, then we'll obviously handle that error. But if everything's all good on this line, what we're actually going to do is just get our transaction. And then I just got some logic here to essentially update the UI to say, hey, thank you that everything was successful. And then the last thing you need to do is make sure that you actually finish and end the transaction to, signify that everything's done. So what does this look like? Well, in a happy path, this all looks like this. So someone's given me a tip. It's all good. And then now I get the view telling me, thank you. Now you might be thinking, all right, cool, let's ship this to production. Let's send it to prod. But if I was to actually run this, there's actually a tiny bit of a problem here. And the problem is that if you were to run this in Xcode, you'd actually get this warning. But what does this actually mean? Well, so far, we've only been discussing the happy path. So we've only been talking about when everything is all good and happy. But in the real world, stuff happens. And that stuff that could happen could be a transaction being interrupted. Someone's not filled out their banking details, or, accepted terms and conditions. You never normally get a happy flow ever. If you do, then you have one lucky app. But normally, you don't get that. So essentially, what this warning is telling us is that we've got interruptions, but we're not actually handling those interruptions. So how do we handle those interruptions in our app? Well, available tools in the StoreKit API within the Swift concurrency updates is this here, which is transaction updates. So this property on the transactions API is an async sequence, which basically allows us to listen to updates for interruptions. So it will push them through. But how will we use it? Well, the whole function looks like this, but what I'm actually going to do is basically just break this down because this is a bit of a beast to look at first. So the first thing we need to do is define our listener, which is why I called this function configure transition listener, and it will return some kind of like task. Now within here, I'm going to create a detached task because I want this to be completely separate away from any other task and it can just be on its own. And I also want the priority to be on the background thread so we can actually listen to any updates on the background. And then any kind of UI updates as well, we'll use the main actor here as well so we don't get any warnings saying we're not publishing on the, on the background thread. So within here, we can also catch errors. So I've got a do catch for catching errors. And this is where we're now going to use that property on the transaction API. So I can now listen to updates for any interruptions that have happened and basically await them. So this will basically push through any kind of interruptions that have happened whilst my app was in use. And I can now handle it within this loop here. So I can just reuse my check verified function to see if everything's all good. And if everything is all good, I'll simply just update my UI, which is to say thank you to the user. And then what will happen is I'll then end that transaction. So to say that, hey, I'm now done. So how will we actually use this function? So where does this function go in our code base? Well, if we want to use this, if you ever worked with like Combine or RX Swift, it's kind of similar to you setting up like a dispose bag or, your cancellables and, you observe, changes. So the first thing we do is create a property here to basically just capture that task so we have it. And then we'll also just set it here. So we'll set up our listener. And then finally, it's a good habit as well to, if that object was ever like, deinitialized, we can actually just cancel the listener and just get rid of it. So now we have our code set up for actually listening to these updates. But how do we actually test it out? Because we've wrote a load of code, but we've not actually tested out the interruptions journey. Well, in Xcode, when you run your applications, there's actually this option here when you're running it. And what this allows us to do is basically see and manage our transactions within our application. So when you tap on this button, you get something like this. And this is basically just everything you've been doing whilst you're, testing out and debugging and developing, your application. And this just has all the details about everything you've been working on. Now, we can do some things as well where we actually control what happens to each transaction. So I could basically delete a transaction, I could reject it, I could accept one, I could resolve any issues I have with them. There's a whole bunch of things I could do with these transactions. But what we want to do is see how we can actually test out interrupted purchases, like that journey, that flow. So when you select your StoreKit configuration file and you go into the editor tab, there's actually this option here, and this allows us to simulate that journey for an interrupted purchase. Now what I'm going to do is just play a video of a demo just showing you what that looks like whilst your app is open. So in this demo here, you're going to see that I actually turn on the interrupted purchases, flow, or the setting, I should say. And then I'm going to open up the, views for managing my transactions. I'm now going to make a transaction that will fail. So when this fails, you'll see it appear here, and it will say it's failed. And it has some issues, which is billing issues. So I can now basically resolve this. And once I resolve it, you'll see it dismisses, and I get my thank you screen. So I can simulate that journey of an interrupted purchase. Now, that was when my app was in the foreground. But what about if I have it where my app is in the background, like it's in a dead state? So in this example here, similar thing, except this time I'm going to kill the app. So we're going to, leave a tip, ignore the Pokemon, and then we're going to then resolve the issues. And then when we resolve the issues, we'll now get the screen that says, thank you, everything's all good, thanks for the tip, as you can see here. So you can see that you can actually test out the two journeys of when your app is in the foreground and your app is in the background, and basically any other scenarios within, your journey for your app. Now, the main thing you want to also remember when you're working with interrupted purchases is whatever setting that you just turned on, make sure that you turn that off, because if you don't turn that off, every purchase that you make, you're going to have that problem. You're going to be thinking that, wow, why is my dev time taking forever to just get through? So don't forget to turn off that setting. Now, if you're someone who's never, set up a product in App Store Connect, well, all you need to do is just go into the App Store, and then there's this little option here on the left-hand side where you can set up your, consumables or your subscriptions, whatever it may be, basically. So you've set up your products, you've now submitted your app onto the App Store, you're now dancing like this guy, you're enjoying your best life, I've released my app onto the store, everything's all good, and then you get something like this. So you get this rejection email, and then from you living your best life and dancing, your face now turns to this. And then, after actually letting it marinate for a bit, you then go from that to this. And I'll be honest with you, when you actually do App Store submissions, it's really frustrating because sometimes Apple will basically reject your app and you'll get just a guideline and you'll explain to the reviewer and you'll get an automated response and you just go back in a feedback loop, so it can get a bit annoying. So what I want to do here is just basically just give you a bit of a checklist to basically just ensure that you've checked all these things before you submit your in-app purchases. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that on App Store Connect, you filled out your terms. So your like tax, banking agreements, anything to do with your banking account, you want to make sure that this has been filled in and is all good. In Xcode, you want to make sure that you've also enabled the in-app purchase capability as well. And you want to make sure that in App Store Connect, your product status at a minimum is ready to submit. You then want to make sure, like I said before, that the product identifiers are also unique, so you don't have duplicate product identifiers. They're all unique to each other. Well, from each other, I should say, actually, not to. And also, as well, you want to test. So when you upload your build to TestFlight, you want to actually make sure that you can actually see the products and everything's working, because that TestFlight build is essentially the closest thing to what a reviewer will see. So if that build is not, working properly, then they're probably just going to like reject it because they can't see your products. So you want to make sure you do that. And then finally, you want to walk the reviewer exactly through the steps and have a video of how they can actually access your, product, because you might assume and think that the Apple reviewer can just like figure it out, but you kind of do have to hold their hands a bit and just make sure that you explicitly clear to them everything that they need to do. So if you follow this checklist, well, if you're from my parts, England, you'll be all good like this in the pub. Now, I'm just going to be wrapping up my talk now, and I actually do have some like laptop stickers with me as well. So if you want to get yourself a free laptop sticker, just come and chat to me. We just talk, like Antoine said before on Slack. We're all approachable. We'd love to talk. We'll talk to everyone. I also as well have some courses, like I mentioned before, on my website. My recent course I released was about core data. So it's like basically just shows you like how to get started with core data in Swift UI, unit testing, all of that, if that's something that interests you. And this is my favorite animation that's coming up. I love this animation. Wow, look at the fire. That's one of the reasons why I love Keynote. But basically, yeah, I also, obviously, like I said before, I have a YouTube channel that you can check out. If you enjoy my teaching style and my, presentation styles, I'm not gonna lie, I do like to bust a joke on my channel, so you kind of do get what you get, like what you saw on stage. But if you enjoy that, this is my channel, so you can check that out as well. So that's pretty much everything from me. I just want to thank everyone for listening. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. I put my socials there if you want to follow me as well. I've not got a Mastodon, unfortunately. I'm just too lazy to set one up. But basically, I've got my YouTube and obviously my website there. I've got a bit of a tradition on my YouTube channel where I say deuces. I'll be open to any questions. And yeah, thanks for listening and having me.